May 1945. Hanover. In a school notebook with a cracked spine, a 34-year-old clerk named Carl writes one sentence he will never read aloud. If we tell the truth, we will lose our bread. If we lie, we will lose ourselves. The line is dangerous. It could not be spoken. It describes the landscape better than any map. The city around him is raw brick and exposed lath, open rooms without walls, staircases that lead nowhere. Hanover had been hit again and again. The last raids took what the earlier ones spared. By May, the war ended in the city, not with a bang, but with the slow click of new locks on doors that had never belonged to the men who now opened them. British troops entered on 10 April. They posted signs and orders. No weapons, no gatherings, curfew after dark. The city's nervous system changed with a notice in 2 languages. The occupation reports describe a population shocked, docile, and starving. The first Allied intelligence summaries measure surrender not in speeches but in the line outside the bread depot. The mathematics of a day becomes simple. Wake, queue, carry rubble, count calories. Carl's wife, Marta, keeps their ration cards in a jar that once held jam, now layered with grease paper. Each card is a promise and a threat. A pound of bread today, nothing tomorrow. The British authorities calculate allotments by district, by occupation, by disease. The numbers in the reports are unforgiving. A healthy adult should receive 2,500 calories. In reality, across the British zone that spring, the average falls below 1,500. The arithmetic of hunger enters the body. Hair thins, teeth loosen. He walks past women with headscarf knots pinned low and buckets on their hips. Trümmerfrauen, rubble women. The word becomes common before it is official. They pass bricks hand to hand. They stack the salvageable ones by curbstones chalked with house numbers that no longer lead to houses. Carl watches them work and feels both relief and shame. The men are missing or dead or pretending not to be either. His own uniform had been grey for a month in 1944 before a fever sent him home. He keeps the fever's papers in a wallet with his identity card. He has the face of someone nobody notices. The city administration continues in whatever rooms have a roof. Files rescued from burning offices dry on windowsills. The British take some, leave others. The mayor is removed, replaced again. Occupation reports track it dryly, effective authority in doubt. Corruption feared. Public opinion hostile to Nazis but not to their neighbors. The line between condemnation and convenience becomes the path of least resistance. Carl's street has a small altar to the dead. Not a church altar. A door propped up on bricks. Photographs of men in uniform. A girl with bows in her hair. A boy who would have turned 6 in June. His mother repeats his name like a wartime prayer. The missing outnumber the certainties. At the Rathaus, a list is posted, a line for vermist, missing. The list grows, then retreats as letters arrive from POW camps, from farms in the Soviet Union, from nameless places. Spidery handwriting reports survival and resolve. Other postcards are official and final. They carry the word gefallen, fallen. The arithmetic of grief is poor at subtraction. Carl writes again in his notebook, "The city looks honest now. It shows everything." The British end fraternization rules by stages, first with children, then with women quietly, then with the city as a whole, because rebuilding needs hands that do more than carry rifles. Cigarettes replace coins. The black market begins openly when official prices lose any link to reality. The market has its own mathematics. 1 American cigarette equals 5 eggs. 10 cigarettes will buy a pair of boots. A pair of boots will buy a chicken. Carl learns the exchange like grammar. He trades a feather bed that his grandmother sewed for a bag of potatoes, and a handful of cigarettes that become soap. Occupation reports describe the scene at Linden, at the train station, at Weiche Kreuzplatz. Makeshift stalls. A boy with a sack of salt. An old man with a single onion set on a cloth as if it is a jewel. A woman offering her wedding ring for flour that is not actually flour but an admixture of rye, barley, and whatever the miller can find. Karl's entry for 21 October 1945 notes the taste. Bread is a word now. The thing is something else. His city is not alone. Across the zones, hunger maps fall on the desks of men who now decide how long others will live. In Wuppertal, in Essen, in Cologne, the same arithmetic with slight differences. The French are stricter. The Americans are bureaucratic and earnest. The British are pragmatic and weary. The Soviets are radical. Their occupation authority in the East calls it anti-fascist democracy. Their math involves land reform, expropriation, and new names on old doors. People disappear into the Soviet internment camps. Another kind of silence begins. But in Hanover, the British run their zone with a careful hand. Allied intelligence summaries for Lower Saxony use phrases like political reliability, uncertain, and passive resistance in the form of inertia. The truth is more granular. People choose survival over ideology. Survival has its own ideology, and it is flexible. The first denazification questionnaires arrive in brown envelopes, Fragebogen. They are documents that know too much. Each sheet is a geometry of guilt, name, date of birth, party number, organizations. Were you a member of the NSDAP? If yes, from when to when? Did you serve in the SASS, NSKK, NSFK? Did you contribute to any organizations financially? The questions multiply. They want to make a past fit into boxes. The boxes have consequences. Spruchkammer, the panels of judgment, convene in rooms warmed by stoves that smoke weakly. Their categories are supposed to cut cleanly through a life. Major offender, offender, lesser offender, follower, exonerated. The names sound precise. In practice, they must be applied by fallible people using affidavits known as Persilschein, whitewashing certificates signed by neighbors who need their own signed. The calculus needs input that the system can tolerate. Allied occupation records count cases by the thousands and then by the hundreds of thousands. In the American zone, they tally 13 million questionnaires, 3.6 million cases processed, a small fraction punished severely. In the British zone, the numbers are lower, the categories less rigid, but the outcome similar. The mathematics of guilt has to be solved with too few digits and too many variables. Karl fills his form with rage in arithmetic. He writes that he joined a party in 1937 to keep his job at the city registry. He lists the dues paid. He was a block warden for 3 months, he writes, but did not attend meetings. He helped no one and harmed no one, he insists. His name appears in an Allied intelligence summary because he registered conscripts in 1943. The report has a neutral tone that feels like accusation. He brings affidavits from Marta's brother, from a neighbor whose son he omitted from a list by misplacing it intentionally. The neighbor writes, "He is a good man." The word good is undefinable and necessary. The Spruchkammer clerk writes down Mitläufer, follower. Category 4. Not a criminal. Not innocent. The term becomes a blanket. It covers millions. It is a compromise between justice and the need to reopen offices on Monday morning. Who goes to prison? Often the men whose names were already whispered before the end. A Gestapo sergeant who beat a woman in an office building that still stands. A warder from a camp near the city. Their sentences enter a ledger. Photos of Nuremberg defendants in newspapers give a moral shape to a system that will never match them in scale. The arithmetic of guilt is narrowed to fit the mathematics of rebuilding. Who returns to their desks? Many. The bureaucracy runs on competence. Competence has time to outlast ideology. Denazification files in the Bundesarchiv show a pattern. Suspensions followed by reinstatements. Permanent bans reserved for zealots with the wrong enemies. The new administration keeps a deep breath, inhales silence, and exhaled the word continuity. Occupation reports note it. The British want stability. The German city managers want legitimacy. The numbers need to add up at the end of the month. There is another population in and around Hanover that needs numbers. Displaced persons, DPs. The neutral term hides unquantifiable lives, Jews from Poland, from Hungary, from the ruins of Lodz and Warsaw, forced laborers from Ukraine, Italian military internees who refuse the name POW. They live in camps that are cities in exile. Bergen-Belsen is 65 kilometers to the northeast. The British liberate it in April. The photographs taken there alter the meaning of the word liberation. In the weeks after, the camp becomes a British-run DP centre. The disease burns through weakened bodies for months. The dead are counted with a precision that memory deserves but cannot bear. The camp has its own market, its own police, its own newspapers. Zionist organizers preach emigration. Rabbis argue points of law over cups of bitter tea. Children learn to write again. A boy writes in a diary, "We are breathing as if for the first time." The British compile an intelligence summary, DP morale variable. Food remains a problem. Relations with local Germans tense. A doctor writes prescriptions that are wishes. Butter and clean sheets. Not available. German towns nearby pretend the camp is further away than it is. There is a road that bows around its perimeter. Locals avoid it. A few go to the fence. They bring bread. They accept money that feels too heavy. A woman from Bergdorf swaps a dress for 2 eggs. She tells herself the barter is normal. She knows it is not. In Hanover, the British show films. The local population is brought into a cinema. The lights go down. The screen shows Belsen. There is no narration needed. The occupation report notes. Audience reaction, shock, tears, denial. Exit interviews ask, "Did you know?" The answers are a range of defenses. We heard rumors. We saw smoke. We did not know. A man says, "Not in our name." He believes it. He also knows that oaths are never that specific. Karl's response is complicated. He does not write about the film in his notebook. The blank page becomes his method of hiding from his own line. He knows that language can protect the speaker instead of the truth. He can feel the trap in his first sentence now. It is not a plan. It is a definition. Winter 1946 to 1947 will be called many things. The hunger winter. The coal winter. The winter of spoiled flour and pried-up floorboards. Temperature and scarcity conspire. River barges freeze into place. Trains that are supposed to bring coal from the Ruhr arrive late or not at all. British occupation memos read like weather reports written by accountants. Coal allocation for Lower Saxony inadequate to meet household needs. Industrial slowdown projected to increase unemployment above target. Blankets do not change these words. The city improvises. A room is heated by burning a chair. A chair is replaced by a crate stolen from an unguarded siding at the freight yard. Coal theft becomes common and is described in British reports as a mass offence. The word mass is the point. It is not criminality. It is adaptation. The Kohlenklau, the coal thief, had been an enemy in wartime posters. Now he is the man 2 doors down. He works nights and has a cough no doctor can fix. Karl writes that he has never been this cold. He is not melodramatic. He is measuring. He writes down the calories allotted to his household each day. He calculates that if he eats the ration, he will lose weight. He cannot afford to lose. He writes, "We will live on our own ghosts." City records report growth in diseases that like thin people, tuberculosis, diphtheria. Schools reopen because they must, but children faint in class. Teachers send them home with notes that say, "Soup if possible." "If possible" becomes a hard phrase. Farm families loan a goat to a city cousin. The goat returns less steady on its hooves. Nachbarschaftshilfe forms around necessity, not virtue. To find calories that ration cards cannot deliver, urban residents take to the roads. Hamsterfahrten, foraging journeys. The word is a joke and a resignation. Karl goes once in February with two other men. They carry the silver that survived the bombing, wrapped in an old pillowcase. The farm is an hour's train ride and 3 hours on foot. The farmer is a woman whose husband is in a camp in the east. She calls him every day by not saying his name. The trade is quick and practical. She does not cheat, and she does not need to be thanked. A ham is cut into pieces by a hand that remembers better years. The routes back are policed by hunger and by men with authority. British MPs set up checkpoints at random. The law is clear. Food must not be moved without papers. The rules are necessary and impossible. Karl makes it home with less than he took out. The difference goes to a camp on the road. A smaller difference goes to a soldier who is not British and who is also cold. The arithmetic of transit sums out to a survival. Insidiously, the city has to grow even as it cannot feed who it has. Expellees, refugees, the Vertriebene, arrive with papers from Silesia, East Prussia, Pomerania. Trains with people in their 40s who look older. Women with children who do not blink often. The Bundesarchiv holds the lists. In 1946, Lower Saxony receives hundreds of thousands. By 1949, 1 in 5 residents will be a newcomer from the east. Some estimates suggest more. The numbers never capture the texture of the arrival. A municipal occupation report in late 1946 uses the term Belegungsrecht, the right of allocation. Rooms will be assigned. An office will walk into a home and place a new family in a corner of what remains of the living room. It is as if the wall has grown back, but without the privacy it was designed to hold. Karl and Marta receive a mother and daughter from Königsberg, Anna and her child. The girl sleeps in a low bed. She does not have nightmares in the first week. Then she does. After that she sleeps well, and Marta does not. Tension is a solution to scarcity. It produces heat and shame. The arithmetic of space, Karl writes. 1 room equals 4 lives and a secret nobody tells. The secret is simple. Nobody wants to pretend that this is temporary. Everyone must pretend. The neighbors use language to adjust the strain. They say Fluchtlinge with the edge of blame. The newcomers call themselves Heimatvertriebene because the longer word spreads the pain into its syllables. The Council of Expellees meets in a schoolroom and notes the unfairness of being sent into rural villages where jobs are scarce and resentment is not. British occupation reports note friction between locals and new arrivals, tensions at markets and water pumps, minor violence. It is a dry text for something that tastes like bile in the mouth. And yet, bonds form. They are shallow at first, deeper later. On Sundays, a woman from East Prussia bakes a cake that tastes like the ones in her town and offers slices to neighbors who decline and then accept. An older man teaches children whose fathers failed to return how to bait a hook and avoid a memory. These are not acts of redemption. They are logistics for living. Other categories of people fill the city with facts. Men return from the West slowly, from the East more slowly still. Prisoner of war camps empty in layers. A man who comes back in 1947 finds his wife remarried to survival. The church that declares a marriage sacrosanct also wants its pews filled. Occupation reports do not count the petitions for quick annulment. Meanwhile, a new politics emerges. It is not born in speeches. It arrives in meetings that begin late and end with quiet handshakes. The communists claim that anti-fascism is the memory Germany needs. They hand out newspapers with sharp words and round numbers. The Social Democrats argue for rights that can be eaten. The Christian Democrats propose reconciliation, order, and private virtue. The British observe, encourage, and at times interfere. They forbid old party symbols. They subsidize paper. They allow a press to run again. But daily newspapers bear headlines that learn to avoid certain verbs and calibrate others. Acknowledges, regrets, rebuilds. The present tense becomes a tool. In the autumn of 1947, the Americans and British fuse their zones for economy. The B zone convokes an economic council in Frankfurt. It is presented as a step toward nothing in particular. The truth is arithmetic. The existing money has no meaning. Money is memory on paper. At this point, no one can afford either. Currency reform arrives on 20 June 1948 in the Western zones, Deutsche Mark, DM. It is a sudden move that feels like an air raid without noise. Prices and wages are recalculated overnight. Everyone receives a small sum in the new money. The shelves fill with goods that had been hoarded or kept under counters for cigarettes. The mathematics of scarcity shifts to the mathematics of production. Ludwig Erhard's name will become shorthand for this shift, a gentle rhetoric of the social market economy. Behind it, hard choices and decisions made without committees when needed. The black market collapses in a week. Cigarettes remain valuable but no longer meaning itself. Karl writes, "The number on the banknote means what it says." He buys a small radio on 24 June for 65 DM. He had not seen one in a shop window in years. The next day, he hears a voice from Berlin, speaking in measured anger. The Soviets have cut land routes to the western sectors of the city. The blockade will become the first line drawn thick in the new Europe. The British and Americans fly supplies. A plane lands every few minutes at Tempelhof, at Gatow, and near here at Wunstorf for staging. Children in the American sector talk about the candy that drifts from handkerchief parachutes. Hanover watches the sky for distant planes headed east, silver proof that the Cold War has its own logistics. Occupation reports now say political reliability improving. The numbers improve with them. Industrial output rises. The metal works resume. Volkswagen in Wolfsburg turns out beetles like beetles. The Ruhr ashes become steel again. An American ship docks at Bremen with sacks of flour stamped with letters that will appear in family photo albums, ERP. European Recovery Program. Marshall Plan. The words become symbols of a new generosity that doubles as self-interest. The British zone receives machines that keep lights on longer hours. The city's factories sign contracts. Karl notes the first sack he sees at the freight yard. He watches men carry it onto a truck and feels something like gratitude, then stops himself because gratitude is a luxury. He files the feeling under "to be named later." He finds work in the city again. In 1949, he is hired as a clerk in the Bauamt, city building office. His Sprüchkammer classification is reviewed and marked as case closed. He sits at a desk under a cracked ceiling. The dried flowers in a jar belong to a woman he replaces. He does not ask where she went. He stamps permits for rebuilding on plots that were once courtyards filled with masonry. Each stamp is a sound that registers as progress. The arithmetic of construction is brutal. 1,000 bricks rebuild a wall. A fence becomes a house. A house is a family. The city draws up a plan, wide boulevards, right angles where curves once were. The ruins presented a chance to erase the old city and its sinuous lanes. The Bauamt debates whether memory has a shape. Karl learns the file numbers for particular streets. He decides that files are easier to hold than streets. He assigns cement to projects based on tables provided by the British Logistics Office. He learns to say no in a way that implies yes later if the papers are in order. The mathematics of fairness becomes a stack of forms on his desk. Men he knew in 1941 reappear in 1950 in the hallway. They have aged into harmless expressions and careful manners. A school administrator with a long wartime title now teaches civics. A police chief is back without his old uniform. The Article 31 law passes in 1951, allowing the re-employment of former public servants. It has a long name and a short purpose. Reintegration. The files show how categories could bend. People whose careers had been trimmed by the Spruchkammer are regrafted to the state. Public safety requires it. So does dignity, says the new rhetoric. The mathematics of guilt undergoes a revision. It is not wrong. It is not wrong. It is a choice. It is a choice. On 23 May 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany declares itself with a simple ceremony. The new basic law is signed in Bonn. Democracy will be strong, the radio says, never again. Karl listens. He feels relief his notebook will not contain. He also feels that the sentence implies a history that has not yet been written. He could write a line, he does not. The city marks its dead with plaques on church walls. The names are too numerous. In 1950, a ceremony dedicates a memorial to victims of the war. The inscription is careful to include everyone and to exclude none. Bombs are mentioned. The missing are invoked. The murdered are not named separately. Schoolbooks shift slowly. The first ones in 1949 treat the Nazi period as a storm that passed. The content grows in the 1950s, but often with a weight that falls on German suffering. A chapter on the expulsions is balanced by a page and a photograph about a camp. The caption uses the passive voice. Children learn that their grandparents suffered. They also learn that the state is now good. Neither lesson is false, neither is complete. Karl's son, Peter, comes home with a civics textbook. It contains a photograph of the Reichstag as a ruin and a hope. He asks his father a question that is not a question. How was it? Karl says, different. Later he writes him a note he will never deliver. We built a house with stones we did not name. The Expellees build organizations. The Bundeswehrtreibenden pushes for recognition and compensation. The Lastenausgleich law of 1952 passes after arguments in committee rooms where men in suits count not people but categories. The law equalizes burdens. It is a bureaucratic victory that still leaves human losses unaccounted. In the city office, forms arrive in stacks. Claims for lost farms, lost warehouses, lost rooms. Karl stamps them. He meets Anna in the corridor. She applied for assistance. He cannot do anything to speed it. He says, it will come. She nods. They do not speak of Königsberg. If they did, the conversation would peel away the paint from the walls. DP camps empty into futures. Many Jews leave for the new state of Israel or the United States. They write letters back to the former camp, now a closed circle on a map, telling of difficult arrivals into warmer climates. Some stay. A tailor from Krakow opens a shop in Limmer. He does not advertise. He does not want curious customers. He repairs a coat. He hands it back with a bow that is his own form of safety. An Allied summary from 1951 observes, DP problem largely resolved, a sentence that could mean many cold things. It means the statistics look better. It also means there are fewer people left to count. Germans and Jews share space without sharing memory. A man in line at a bakery sees a woman with a tattoo on her forearm. He looks away. He will later tell himself that staring would have been worse. He is correct, also false. The arithmetic of contact lies in such lines. In 1953, the East rises. Workers in the German Democratic Republic strike. Tanks in East Berlin end a day that seemed to have started differently. The radio in Hanover broadcasts the news in calm tones. West German politicians describe the events as proof that the New West is the only path. The Cold War becomes a climate in which some uncomfortable questions can remain unasked. Anti-communism permits amnesties. By 1954, Schmidt's sentence is commuted. A warder returns home to a street that does not ask for his name. He lives quietly. Quiet is a currency in these years. The returning POWs are the last epic. In 1955, trains arrive with men from camps in the Soviet Union. The Heimkehrer come back as thin photographs of themselves, then slowly as bodies that fill chairs at kitchen tables. The government organizes welcome ceremonies. Konrad Adenauer speaks at a station. He says that a nation has a responsibility to its sons. Karl watches on a small television in the window of a shop. The city applauds the screen. The flattering word for this is solidarity. The exact word is relief. The men re-enter lives that have already been adapted to their absence. Occupation reports no longer exist. The Federal Republic keeps records, but they are domestic. The system now writes its own history. In 1958, the city unveils a restored facade. It looks like the one in a postcard from 1930. The decision not to restore the narrow lanes behind it is a choice to keep the new right angles. The past peeks from behind the scene. The present insists on forward movement. Karl walks past it and thinks about a woman he saw in 1946 carrying bricks until her fingers bled. She is not in any photograph. The archive files do not bear her name. The mathematics of recognition is unfair. His work changes with the economy. By the mid-1950s, the city is a workshop that hums with confidence. When someone says, Wirtschaftswunder, the word carries less wonder for the people doing the work. They count their hours, their incremental improvements, their new washing machines, their time with children that is still too short. The city authorizes new estates on the edge. A modernist strip of flat roofs rises where allotment gardens once stood. The Bauamt implements regulations about windows and setbacks. People install curtains like flags for privacy. The Democrats hold elections. Voters choose. The ballot is a practiced motion by 1957. The rhetoric is less about memory and more about pensions and highways. Karl votes. He does not tell anyone for whom. He is honest with his ballot. He is not honest with himself about why. His life is comfortable enough to produce anxiety. He knows the past has not been settled. In 1958, a prosecutor in Ulm opens an inquiry into mass murder units. The case reaches the newspapers. The Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt in 1963 will be a longer second shock. In these proceedings, the language that had been kept precise and narrow widens. Testimonies from survivors stand in rooms where men in suits listen. School teachers bring students. The broadcasters speak cautiously. The nation learns to say Auschwitz with the weight it demands. And yet, in Hanover, on Tuesday mornings, paper is still stamped, buses still run, lunches are packed. The mathematics of daily life absorbs the new data without changing shape immediately. Culture moves by degrees. Karl returns to the archives of his own building for reference. He reads older files and finds his own name in ink. He is sometimes a footnote. He is sometimes the person who signed the note. He feels the oddity of being an actor and an archivist. He wonders if this is what adulthood is, reading yourself into a history you did not choose to write. He meets the tailor from Krakow by chance. It is 1959. He brings a coat sleeve to be repaired. The tailor's forearms, the numbers, the scars, are the obvious thing in the room. They do not speak of them. The tailor says, "Friday." Carl nods, "Friday." Carl nods, "Friday." He counts money into a palm and later, at home, tells himself he should have said something. He does not say what. He writes in his notebook. Sometimes the right words have to be bought and then burned. Public language evolves. Monuments in the 1960s begin to say victims of National Socialism, as well as victims of war. The dual phrasing indicates an anti-theft system for memory. A new generation asks questions. The first of the documentaries shot for television, with archival footage and the music that indicates seriousness, are screened. The narrator speaks in a precise Hochdeutsch that demands belief. The Bundesarchiv provides documents and voiceover with a cool certainty. It is not the same as a man's voice in his kitchen when he remembers the noise of planes and the smell of coal that winter. The schools revise their history curriculum again. The teacher writes Weimar on the board, and then Hitler's seizure of power, and then dictatorship. He includes dates and causes. It is a 5-step sequence. It is a staircase that leads nowhere. The students learn it well enough to pass exams. They build a distance into their understanding. For them, the war is a treaty and a series of photographs. For Carl, it is bone and air. In the city office, one of Carl's colleagues retires. He was an efficient man. The farewell speech mentions his years of service, his family, his garden. It does not mention his war. It would be impolite. People prefer politeness to honesty because it is easier to schedule. The state issues new identification cards with cleaner type. Carl receives his, and the edges are crisp. He has become a number that is not a threat. He appreciates the civility of it. He also recognizes that the papers he handles every day are both reality and theater. He stamps building permits for stores that sell television sets, that sell images of the world, that do not include the past as the audience lived it. He writes into his notebook the logics of the years as if they are math problems that can be solved. The mathematics of food, rations that never added up, black market rates that did. The day the DM made numbers honest again. The arithmetic of guilt, categories that were both accurate and evasive, sentences commuted in the name of building something better, neighbors assigned to new categories when the old became inconvenient, the mathematics of rooms, expellees billeted in parlors where families had celebrated baptisms, resentment followed by adaptation, followed by holidays shared in the new calendar. The arithmetic of memory, films seen and unseen, school units written by committees, funerals with priests who chose some nouns and left the rest in the sacristy. The mathematics of democracy, votes cast freely by people who wanted safety more than truth, then learned that one made the other possible. He considers writing a history of his own street, a sequence of names, houses, and events. He does not. He writes instead a line similar to the first one. It is the outline of an apology. Silence kept us fed. It harmed the ones our hunger had already harmed. He gauges how dangerous this sentence would be as it leaves the page. It would rank somewhere between impolite and unbearable, depending on the room. He keeps it in the notebook, which he hides under the top drawer of the desk where the wood has splintered from an old water stain. He collects testimonies the way some men collect stamps. A woman who lost a child and moved in with him for a year in 1946. She tells it all out of order and he does not reorder it. An expellee whose husband did not return until the year when washing machines began to outnumber fires in kitchens. A factory foreman who admits to a thing that will never be in any file. He writes these stories in fragments. He stops the pen when it begins to feel like confession. He is not the right person to confess. He reads in newspapers about the past as if it is an event still unfolding. He sees a photograph of a man being tried in Frankfurt in 1964 and recognizes a face from a room in 1942. He does not tell anyone. What would he say? I saw him once? He refuses the fiction of innocence. He also refuses the performance of outrage that can be offered cheaply in a quiet room. One document enters his hands that he cannot file neutrally. It is an Allied intelligence summary from 1945, misfiled in a folder that should have contained only instructions for distributing roofing materials. It describes his block with coordinates, names the party functionaries there, and notes general compliance with orders, no sabotage. Simple sentences with the weight of accusation. He reads it as if it were about someone else. Then he reads it as if it were about him. He sees the words, no sabotage, and wonders what the report would have said if there had been any. He puts it back. He does not misfile it again. A ceremony in the late 1960s dedicates a memorial to the victims of the Jewish people in our city. It is the first local monument that says Jews without euphemism. At the event, a rabbi speaks in a German that holds Hebrew at its edges. Karl stands at the back. He hears the words. He remembers the tailor's forearms. He considers walking to the shop after. He does not find it when he tries. The street has changed. The shop is gone. This is also a form of resolution. Into the 1970s, the city is modern. Glass where there were once bricks. Marinade on meat that used to be boiled. The past lives in the way people cross streets, cautious then more bold. The past lives in the pauses in speeches. The past lives in the objects that remain despite logic. Karl still has the jar that once held jam. It still holds ration cards. He does not have to keep them. He will never throw them away. His son leaves for university, philosophy and politics. He returns with words like Vergangenheitsbewältigung, the wrestle with the past, and Aufarbeitung, working through. He applies these words to his father gently and then with frustration. He is not wrong. He is also not helpful. The words are approximate. The tasks are daily and cannot always be widened into statements. The work is in a conversation between a man and himself in the hours before sleep, thinking of a sentence he once wrote in a school notebook with a cracked spine. He is in his 60s when he begins to sort his papers. He saves the Spruchkammer notices, the ration card stubs, the discrete indignities of the end and the beginning. He finds the first page. 12 May 1945. The line is the heart of it all. He copies it without changing it. If we tell the truth, we will lose our bread. If we lie, we will lose ourselves. He writes below it a chronology that collects the smaller truths. 10 April 1945, British troops enter Hanover. May 1945, ration cards introduced. 1,200 calories for many, less for some. June 1945, denazification questionnaires. Life turns into boxes. October 1945, first British report on passive resistance. April 1946, winter 1946-1947, coal and hunger, the arithmetic of heat becomes theft. 20. June 1948, Deutsche Mark, shelves fill, black market fades. June 1948 to May 1949, planes in the sky, a city held up by air. 23. May 1949, basic law. People listen and decide to go on. 1951, reintegration laws, men and their uniforms separated by law. 1952, compensation passed, another arithmetic. 1955, trains bring men. He knows this is partial. He knows there are other lines he can write, a woman carrying bricks. He does not know her name, a tailor's arm and the Friday he never kept. A child from Königsberg who slept without nightmares in 1946, then with, then without again. The enormous secret is that there were millions of these stories, and none of them explain the whole. The smaller secret is that the whole is not the point. The past persists in the body. Scar tissue. A certain pause at a knock on a door. A preference for the seat that faces the room. He rereads the phrase, "the mathematics of guilt," and feels its limitation. It suggests a solution. There was no solution, only a set of sums that had to be carried into the next line of the ledger. He chooses a different word. The arithmetic of living with what was done. It is not elegant, it is accurate. He walks through streets he once stamped on paper. He passes a school named for a resistance figure he had never heard of when he was the age of the students inside. He pauses by a plaque with a list of names of Jews deported in 1941. He reads them out loud in a voice too low to carry. He makes no speech. He does not believe speeches help. He believes in the rightness of saying names. He sits in a cafe with black coffee, the strength of metal. He watches young men wear long hair and longer opinions and grow their beards like statements. They argue about a war in a country with jungle and helicopters. They call their elders cowards. They are wrong and right unavoidably. A poster on a wall advertises a film festival with documentary films about a past that still resists being framed. The narrator voices in these films imitate the calm of the old Allied newsreels, the tone that seems to know everything. The new films add doubt. Doubt is progress if it does not become a toxin. Carl understands that history is the study of limits. What people will not do, what they cannot avoid, what they can pretend to have avoided. The war after the war is to bear weight without slipping into self-pity or absolution. He recognizes this as a sentence that would be tolerated in most rooms now. It would have been dangerous in 1945. He is mildly ashamed that danger has receded into the safe distance of words. He knows a tailor whose numbers never had that luxury. He is older now. He keeps his files neatly. He makes sure that when he dies, someone can make sense of the life they represent, even if the life cannot be justified. He is not looking for exoneration. He does not think in terms of guilt as a weight he can hand to someone else. He writes the last entry in November 1973. He chooses the same date format as always because habits are memory's most efficient tools. 12 November 1973. He writes, "In this city we built with bricks that remembered heat. We lived with people who had reasons to hate us, and people we had reasons to ignore. We measured food and fuel and the number of men who came back. We counted rooms and hours and what we could not say. We learned that democracy here meant fewer uniforms and more forms. It meant forgiveness without being asked and guilt without guillotine.